Okay.
30 seconds.
The audio is live now. So right now, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you're looking at a screen that says we'll begin in a moment.
20 seconds.
And I'm getting the call that it's 20 seconds, but that was a few seconds ago, and my radio announcer voice will...
10 seconds.
Yes, you do have one.
10 seconds. I like the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2.
This is how to train a speaker. Good. Welcome to True Health Tuesday, and the truth will set you free. Today, how would you like to know how to end a pandemic? Okay? And so that we can just start living again. Because honest to God, if you're walking around scared of everybody, you're scared of social distancing, you're freaked out about washing your hands, about everything else, you're dying a little bit every day. So we have to get our world back. Okay, so we're going to go over a step-by-step plan on how to end the pandemic, because this is not the only pandemic that we've ever had. But first, I got to give a shout out to my brother-in-law. He left the planet Christmas, and his name's Jesse James, and it just, if you could have met him, and those of you that have, know what a special guy. This guy had flair, style, grace, and just friggin' opinions up the yin-yang, and you know where the yin-yang is. But this Jesse and my sister, they were so in love for over 20 years, I think it's 26 years, that we called them the Schmoopies. And it's just, if you've got a good spiritual view of the world, you know that people that have died, their energy is still here. And so, Jess, God bless you, man. I'm glad you're out of pain and you're on the spiritual aspect. But brother, I'm always going to miss you. You're just amazing, amazing guy. My life is blessed to have known him for such a short time. I only knew him for like 30 years. Now, all of the information we're going to put on is Dr. B VIP, because some of the information we have is not approved by the Ministry of Truth. And if anyone knows what the 1984 movie is about, or the book was about, the Ministry of Truth was full of lies. Extreme Health Academy. Please get on there. You're going to find a community of people that have recovered, real people, real solutions of virtually every kind of disease. And it is such an amazing group. And I'm on there once a month doing a webinar. Now, let's get into this, because it's kind of exciting now. Because with the pandemic, the CDC just came out and they're shortening quarantine times. Yes, that's true. So, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, reversal of a previous recommendation, cut the number of days isolation for Americans who contract COVID from 10 days to 5 days, regardless of vaccine status. Those that close contacts need a quarantine. Latest guideline, more evidence. Okay, now let's go on. And this is Rochelle Walensky, director of the CDC, quote, "Not all of those cases are going to be severe. In fact, many are going to be asymptomatic," she told Newswire. "We want to make sure that that there is a mechanism by which we can safely continue to keep society functioning while following the science." Amazing, end of quote. Following the science. I mean, there is a special place in hell for people that have utilized that to browbeat, shut down businesses, shut down churches, shut down everything for quarantining people with no symptoms. Now, you may have heard, and you will hear coming up, because there is going to be more and more of a panic on hospitals are overcrowded. Hospitals are overcrowded. Well, let's cut the BS right now, because hospitals are a business. Now, if you have a hospital, okay, that has 100% capacity all the time, that is not good, okay? If you have a hotel that has 100% capacity, that is not good, because people that have to come into a hotel, they'll be turned away and you're going to get a bad reputation. Same thing with a hospital. Most high-end hotels like to function at around 75 to 80%. Now, hospitals, if you're at less than 85%, you got to let nurses go. If you're more than 85%, your hospital can get a bad reputation. So when you know that there's called a seasonal flu, anybody in here ever remember the flu? I know, no, you got to think way back to 2019. Okay, we had no one in America has had the flu for 2.5 friggin' years, or the common cold. Okay, so in seasonal, because flus are seasonal, they go up and down with the season, and so sure enough, thank you very much. Hot water, delicious. Okay, seasonal. There's always an increase in the wintertime in hospital utilization. So don't let the media suck you into this. Now, let's look at this British Medical Journal article. Okay, and the title of the article is "The End of the Pandemic Will Not Be Televised." Now, this is one of the oldest, most respected medical journals on the planet. We have to go through this because we have to cut through all of the crap. This is a medical journal talking about the pandemic. Instead of looking at the fear and ignorance that's purported by your relatives, your family, because they're looking at the constant ticker tape, let's look at what the British Medical Journal has to say. As the year 2021 started, the COVID-19 pandemic seemed to be receding. Discussions and predictions about opening up, return to normal, and achieving herd immunity were in the air. But for many, the optimism receded as cases and deaths surged in India, Brazil, and elsewhere. Attention to variants, SARS-CoV-2 variants, and most recent, the emergence of Omicron. It just seemed to be on the horizon. It was interrupted by a foreboding that the pandemic could be a long way from being over. Are you scared yet? Okay. Unlike any previous pandemic, COVID-19 has been closely tracked through dashboards that aim to show the real-time movement and effect of the coronavirus. They track laboratory testing metrics, hospitals, intensive care admission, transmission rates, and most recently, vaccine doses delivered. These dashboards and panel number statistics, epidemic curves, heat maps have dominated television, computers, smartphones. At their core is the allure of objectivity and data to grasp into the midst of uncertainty and fear. They have helped populations conceptualize the need for a rapid containment and control, directing public sentiment, fueling pressure for countermeasures, and maintaining an aura of emergency. They offer a sense of control when cases are coming down and certain countermeasures, but they also drive a sense of helplessness and pending catastrophe as cases rise. Okay, so are you sufficiently panicked yet? I'm trying to maintain a level of intensity and fear while I'm reading this, okay, because there's not a ticker tape. Think of this, every ticker tape, every thing from Medscape that I've read for the last year and a half, every news article, every television program, every billboard on the freeway is advertising this. So what do we want to do? We want to look back at the worst pandemic the world ever saw in recorded history. Okay, not the Black Death. Okay, let's look at the 1918 one. Okay, because this seems to be it. And this is also out of the British Medical Journal article. In 1918, the pandemic's first wave was mild and attracted relatively little attention. In response to the second wave that scorched its way around the globe, some cities in the U.S. implemented non-pharmaceutical interventions, such as school closures and restrictions on public gatherings. Most of these countermeasures were relaxed within 2 to 8 weeks, and the disruption of social life was relatively short-lived. I'm going to stop right there for a second. The worst pandemic in modern history was 1918, and that's what they're talking about. They shut down the schools for no more than 2 to 8 weeks. We're 21 months into this, okay? The psychological damage, the harm of social distancing, the lack of risk-benefit ratio. Now think of this, with everything in the world, there is a risk and there is a benefit, okay? Do the benefits outweigh the risks? Okay, now do the benefits of covering your face with a mask, okay, the psychological harms, rebreathing in your own waste, okay, the lack of connection with societies, okay, is that worth it for your protection? Okay, we're going to get into the science in the second part because these are questions that if you ask now, your video would be taken off, you would be labeled as fact checkers. Okay, if we talk about social distancing, that this is the only virus with a tape measure, that 6 feet is really safe, and unless you're sitting down and eating, and of course, if you're sitting down eating, you got to have the mask off. If you stand up, you got to put the mask on. Now, are these measures based in science, or are they based in societal control? Okay, so, you know, these are the questions that I'm asking myself. If the 1918 pandemic was much worse, why did the measures last only a short period of time? John Barry, leading historian studying the 1918 pandemic, explained the whole thing was very swift. Unlike COVID, the stress was not continuous, noting that many places experienced several months of relative normalcy between waves. I'm going to stop there. He's not talking about Texas, South Dakota, and Florida. Okay? Okay. Okay, let me explain to you folks. Texas, South Dakota, and Florida are free states. Okay? I'm living in California and in New York. You have to have the vaccine passport to do just about everything. So we are at a level of insanity that's in new worlds that they didn't do back in 1918. New York and Chicago, two of the largest, country's largest cities, never closed their schools despite Chicago schools reaching an absentee rate of nearly 50%. Where schools closed, they stayed shut for a median of 4 weeks. Again, let's look at the risk-benefit ratio. Closing a school, are children at risk of this virus or the virus in 1918? Wouldn't you like to know what's the psychological harm of your child staying at home? What's the psychological and physiologic damage of a child wearing a mask? What's the benefit of a child wearing a mask? Do the benefits outweigh the risks? Are you intelligent enough to ask that question? Are you intelligent enough to look at the answer? Or do you just want to follow the authorities and whatever they say you're going to put on your child? Well, wait, that's a bad reference. So let's look at back in 1918. Okay, clean water was responsible for the biggest decline in infant mortality. Clean water also appeared to have led to a near eradication of typhoid, pneumonia, tuberculosis, meningitis, diphtheria, croup. Clean water technologies are the most important public health. Now, in 1918, they didn't have these kind of technologies. They didn't have refrigeration. They didn't have a road system, okay, that could get fresh fruit up there. So it was a totally different environment. But of course, also, they didn't have the technology to continually panic the public. Now, life expectancy, you might say, well, people were dying at 46 years old. That was the life. No, that's not true. Let's look at this article. Benjamin Radford, human lifespans nearly constant for 2,000 years. Now, lifespans, life expectancy is different than a lifespan. Expectancy in 1907 was 45.6 years. Now, think of that. If you have twin boys born in 1900, one dies at birth, one lives to 90. What's their life expectancy? Okay, 45 years. Two kids, one lived to 90. Okay, statistically accurate but meaningless. It has no bearing on it. The fact that maximum human lifespan, a concept often confused with life expectancy, has remained the same for thousands of years. How do we know? We have data going back to 300 BC. I mean, beyond that too, but we actually have hard data. And I love this. Hieronymus, 104 years old, went to war, stood much toil and many wounds, lived 104 years, as Archimedes says in his 9th book of history of Asia. He expresses his amazement at the man because up to his last day, he was still vigorous in his marital relations, in all his faculties, having none of the symptoms of ill health. Why do I honor that guy? Who wouldn't? Can I get an amen?
Amen.
How do they know?
How did they know? I don't know. A happy wife. Okay. He was probably dating some young hottie who was only like 90. So when we look at this, let's go back to the article, British Medical Journal. The Asian flu. Okay, 1957. It reached the American shores around mid-year. Over the course of the next 9 months, which included 2 waves, 1957 and 1958, 80 million Americans were bedridden with respiratory diseases. 80 million. That doesn't mean 80 million died. Okay, but look at it just in perspective. There were only 178 million Americans. Okay, and 80 of them, almost half, were down, sick, bedridden. Now, is that happening in this current COVID crisis? No, not even close. By late October, college matches around the country were being canceled because many players were ill. Team managers scrambled at last-minute replacements, and no major contests were canceled. Without fanfare, 2 years, the Asian flu virus was quietly picking off everyone it missed the first time. See, when you get exposed, you might be able to develop an immune system response, but not everyone's going to get exposed. Estimates currently are over 100 million Americans have been exposed, recovered, and are fine. Earlier that year, it was estimated 20% of school children in Los Angeles, or around 120,000 children, and 15% of industrial workers were absent with influenza. 1957. Okay, now when we look, oh yeah, sorry. The Hong Kong flu, 1968, and I know what you're thinking about. You're thinking about Woodstock. Yeah. No, we don't call it Woodstock. Okay, we call it super spreader. Okay? A decade later, that's only if we had these little portable devices with the continuous ticker tape. A decade later, another pandemic arrives. Officials later estimated killed 1 million people globally, but its impact on public health, interventions, and social life was minimal. The episode was not significantly deadlier than a typical bad flu season, noting that people who lived through it even knew it occurred. Historian, at the height of the outbreak in December 1968, New York Times described the pandemic as one of the worst in the nation's history. There were few school closures, and businesses, for the most part, continued to operate as normal. So instead of the hoopla, what kills most Americans? What's the number one cause of disease or death? Heart disease. You're talking about 659,000 people every year. That's 59,000 people every month dying of heart disease. Now, we know the causes of heart disease. Okay, we know a lot of them are the toxic fats, the toxic lifestyle, toxic blood, medications. All of these things are causing heart disease. So do we change lifestyles? Do we open gyms? Do we force people to eat fresh fruit? Do we tell people you have to walk outside in order to have a healthy heart? Are we forcing interventions like that? No. Okay, now cancer. About 600,000 a year die from cancer, the number 1 and 2. Now, when we're looking at the deaths, remember that ticker tape's going wrong right now, okay? And if you say anything that the Voldemort virus is no worse than the flu, okay, you will get shut down. You will get your channel removed. You'll get video deleted. You'll be shut down because of the censorship. But now, because what are they going to say? Tell that to the 800,000 dead. Okay, well, that's 21 months. Okay, that's going back from March of last year to December of this year. So let's get a level playing field here. Okay, let's take heart disease and cancer. Okay, if you had those in the same 21 months, you're talking over 2.2 million people. You're looking at about 3 million people die every year in America. That's 7,700 people die every day. And we're not shutting everything down. Do you know what I mean? I got a challenge with that. So let's go to Worldometers, and let's look at America. Okay, and this is America's statistics as of yesterday. 42 million cases. Now you can argue, how are the cases tested? Are they tested using a PCR test? Are they tested using an antibody test? How accurate are those tests? How inaccurate are those tests? If you do a cycle threshold on the PCR test over 30, You're looking at a 97% false positive, but you can't mention any of that stuff, otherwise you get deleted. Okay, so I won't. But let's just say for the shits and giggles, 42 million cases. Okay, 41,200,000 recovered. That means that a good hunk of this, 98% of the people that get this, recover. 98% of the people that get this recover. Okay, that means 2% don't. Now, in my world, I would look at those 2% and say, wow, did you guys have any comorbid conditions? Or could the numbers be off? Wouldn't, I mean, you know, we're just talking common sense. Okay, just common sense. Because I know for one thing, I've been in practice over 20-something years. Okay, I think it's like 23 years now, 24 years. And I haven't had one person come in with a cold or flu in about 2 years. It's always COVID. I was diagnosed. Okay. So let's go way back, and this is going to be tough for a lot of people, to March 24th, 2020. March 24th. Every doctor in America got this letter that says, look, we have to drum up business. Wait, no, it doesn't say that. It's a new ICD-9 code. So now, if death certificates report terms such as probable COVID, likely COVID, new terms are going to be signed a new COVID TV or ICD-9 code. COVID-19 should be reported on the death certificate for all descendants where the disease caused, is assumed to have caused or contributed to the death. So this isn't they died from COVID, they died with COVID. And this is where you hear all those jokes and stuff. Yeah, the guy was hit by a bus, but he actually died of COVID. Okay, you know, the guy had, you know, chemotherapy, radiation, heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, multiple medications, and kidney failure, but he died of COVID. Okay, and this has been going on for a long time. Now, what's unusual, diseases were never mentioned or like this. Now, again, Ministry of Truth, please look at our references. This is the CDC. Oh my God, I shouldn't have said that because the CDC has been fact-checked by the fact-checkers, even though the CDC is the ultimate God on the universe. Okay, this shows that their numbers, that 800,000 figure, is only 94% off. Okay, only 94% off. So it turns out that you have to have a 2.9 comorbid conditions in order to qualify for that diagnosis, in order to die from that. Now you might say that's doesn't seem right. For 6% of the deaths, COVID-19 was the only cause mentioned for the deaths with conditions or causes in addition to COVID-19. On average, there were 2.9 additional conditions as cause of death. Okay, but it was listed as the primary. Now, this is psych.com because I've got a big challenge. We're coming up to seasonal affective disorder. We're looking at 21 months of constant stress, 21 months of people losing their jobs and their livelihood and their families. People in our family, we've got some of our family that can't come and see us because we're not vaccinated, okay? And that's foolishness. Okay, and these are educated people that I've known my whole life. Social distancing and isolation. There's a robust evidence that social isolation and loneliness significantly increase premature mortality, and the magnitude of risk exceeds many of the leading health indicators. So shouldn't we look at isolating people in senior centers and old folks' homes, isolating families? What's the risk-benefit ratio? You know, shouldn't we look into that before it's implemented? Okay? And when you hear assholes say, follow the science, really, the science. I'm telling you right now, if you go to any courtroom in the world, and they have two experts, one for the defense, one for the prosecution, both from the same fields, they are going to be equally qualified. They're going to have differences of opinion on every subject. There is no the Bible when it comes to science. Let's go back to the article. The end of the pandemic will not be televised. Okay, There is no universal definition of an epidemiological parameter that of the end of the pandemic. By what metric will we know when it's actually over? Now, the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 pandemic, but who will tell us when it's over? The ubiquity of the dashboards has helped us create a sense that the pandemic will be over when dashboard indicators reach all either zero, no infections, no deaths, no cases, or 100% vaccinated. Will any of that ever happen? No. How could you have 100% vaccinated? Because it used to be 1, then it's 2, now it's 3, now there's a 4th booster, they're talking a 5th booster. In a couple of the other countries, they're saying, look, we're going to have to get this about every 4 to 6 months. So what if you have, let's say it's 2024 and you only have 4 of the 6 boosters, so you are now considered unvaccinated. Is that ever going to go away? Did we completely eliminate the flu? No. Okay, so this is ridiculous. Respiratory pandemics. Oh, this one's still working. Thank you. I got my team getting me a bunch of hot water. God bless you, Sarah. Okay, respiratory pandemics of the past 130 years have been followed by annual seasonal waves fueled by the viral epidemic and endemicity, and typically continue until the next pandemic. What goes up comes back down. Now, this is hugely important because when we look at this, the 1918 pandemic, okay, 1918, big deal, right? The notion that reinforced by the dashboards, because remember, the dashboard is your computer. That's your cell phone. That's your neighbor that's watching CNN. Okay, that's your friends. I mean, this is just crazy what it's doing to people. Historically, evidence that substantial influence of morbidity and mortality continues to occur season after season between pandemics. The interpandemic season of 1928 to 1929, for example, had over 100,000 excess deaths from the 1918 pandemic virus, estimated to occur in a population 1/3 the size of today. So 100,000 excess deaths, okay, with a population of about 100 million, okay, in 1928 to 1929, from a virus 10 years earlier. Okay, now when we're looking at this, we understand that a lot of the therapies were ineffective. They were giving a lot of aspirin, okay, which caused hemorrhagic bleeding, and we're seeing a lot of the therapies that were involved is crazy. And luckily in the last 100 years, our therapies have gotten quite a bit better. But can you see this? That it never goes away. The only way that you can understand is that we're designed to live with these viruses and we have to strengthen our immune system. The distinctions are not trivial, as excess mortality is the classic metric for assessing severity. Interpandemic years have had higher death tolls than pandemic seasons, such as the 46 to 47 season that preceded the 1957 to 58 pandemic, and hence, a pandemic's end cannot be defined on the absence of excess deaths associated with pandemic pathogen, particularly when the World Health Meter says you got 98% chance of not having an issue. The end of pandemic will not be brought to you. History suggests that the end of the pandemic will not simply follow the attainment of herd immunity or an official declaration. Rather, it will occur gradually and unevenly as societies cease to be all consumed by the pandemic's shocking metrics. Pandemic ending is more of a question of lived experience and thus more of a social phenomenon than a biologic one. Can anyone say with me, Texas? Florida, South Dakota, because we get patients from there. And they come in here and they go, wow, Orange County, you guys aren't wearing masks, but we went to LA and those people are crazy. Okay, it's a social thing. Okay, it ends when we end it. Okay, this is huge. Dashboards fighting or fueling the pandemic. Now, if you were responsible for a country and you knew that emotional stress weakens the immune system, would you want to force people with a medical procedure so they can't keep their job, so they would lose their income? Would you want to force them to close their business? I mean, we had I think this guy was in California, but it was like strip joints are open and they were closing churches. So when he came on the pulpit, he had stripping music and he took his tie off and then went in and talked about Christ. So, you know, I mean, it's, you know, he's fudging the system a little bit. Okay. So if you're in charge of a country and you were really concerned about the people, would you look at the risk-benefit ratio of the interventions? Yes or yes? Okay. Anybody that doesn't, that is just doing this to provide panic, is either completely an idiot, okay, or they have a different agenda. Deactivating or disconnecting ourselves from the dashboard be the single most powerful action towards ending the pandemic. This is not burying as one head in the sand. Rather, it's recognizing that no single or joint set of dashboard metrics can tell us when the pandemic is over. Okay, that's the British Medical Journal. Now let's just see what they say about fact checkers. Here's another article. Title of the article, COVID-19 researcher blows whistle on data integrity issues in Pfizer vaccine trials. Now Pfizer is one of the producers of the mRNA technology or vaccine. Now, just for heck of it, dear Mark Zuckerberg, okay, the open letter from British Medical Journal to them. We are Fiona Godley and Kareem Abbasi, editors of the British Medical Journal, one of the oldest and most influential general medical journals. We are writing to raise serious concerns about fact-checking being undertaken by third party on behalf of Facebook and Meta. So we have, we're looking at a peer-reviewed medical journal, one of the oldest, most respected, and their job is to investigate certain things to make sure that it's accurate. So this is the data they had. In September, a former employee of Ventavia, a contract research company helping carry out the main Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine trial, began providing the British Medical Journal with dozens of internal company documents, photos, auto recording, and emails. These materials revealed a host of poor clinical trial research practices occurring at Ventavia that could impact the data integrity and patient safety. We also discovered that despite receiving a direct complaint about these problems over a year ago, the FDA did not inspect Ventavia's trial sites. The BMJ commissioned an investigative reporter to write up a story for our journal. The article was published on November 2nd following a legal review, an external peer review, and subject to the British Medical Journal's usual high editorial oversight and review. Did they just put up, you know, a couple of things? No. But from November 10th, our readers began experiencing a variety of problems trying to share our article. Some reported it unable to share. Many reporters having their posts flagged as missing content. Independent fact checkers say this information could mislead people. Trying to post the article on Facebook, people repeatedly shared it, had false information on it. We find the fact check performed by Lead Stories to be inaccurate, incompetent, and irresponsible. It fails to provide assertions that the BMJ article was wrong. Okay, it's a nonsensical title. Fact check, British Medical Journal did not reveal disqualifying and ignored report flaws in Pfizer COVID vaccine trials. It contains a screenshot of our article with a stamp over it stating flaws reviewed, despite the Lead Stories article not identifying anything false or untrue in the British Medical Journal. Think of this. They have somebody that's saying that the research of this forced vaccine, this untested, unproven, no FDA approval, emergency use authorization. And you might say, no, Comirnaty is it. Yeah, Comirnaty is not in production. They're trying to burn up the one that they already produced. Okay, and they're saying, look, there's a problem with the trials. So let's look at this. American Institute for Economic Research. The catastrophic impact of COVID forced societal lockdowns. Now, this is American Institute for Economic Research. Do you think negatively affecting the economy of America may negatively affect people's health? Yes or yes? The present COVID-inspired forced lockdowns on business and school closures are and have been counterproductive, not sustainable, and are quite frankly meritless and unscientific. They have been disastrous and just plain wrong. There's been no good reason for this. Stanford's John P. Ioannidis identified 36 studies along with additional 7 preliminary national estimates, 50 pieces of data, and concluded that among people less than 70 years old across the world, infectious fatality rates range from 0 to 0.57, with a median of 0.05% across the different globe locations. Let me remind it again, 0.05%. Okay, if you read that in the other direction, because this is the people that it's affected, okay, it will not positively affect 99.95% of the population. Can one even imagine an implementation of such draconian regulations for the annual flu? Of course not. Not satisfied with the current well-documented failures of lockdowns, our leaders are inexplicably doubling and tripling down to introduce an even hardening punitive lockdowns and constraints. The lockdowns are not based in science. Okay, there is no risk-benefit ratio. What's the benefit of locking down? Well, you know, you have less physical contact with people. What's the risk of locking down? You have less physical contact with people. Okay, you have no social interaction. You have no job. You can't travel. And that we're seeing this now. Okay, childhood malnutrition. Again, this is one of the worst consequences borne by children. Some of the strategies to respond to the COVID-19, such as physical distancing, school closure, trade restrictions, country lockdowns impacting foods, child malnutrition, and this is out of the Lancet, and this was last year, 2020. It's time we take this back. The pandemic will never end until you end it. Okay, if you're wearing a mask in an area that you don't have to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Be part of the solution, not part of the control. If someone says, well, I'm wearing a mask now because I want to respect people. Okay, great, okay. You know, you can have that, you know, victim mentality that you want to respect them and go down the rabbit hole. Because remember, what happened in Germany? Okay, you know, Jews couldn't buy bread after 5, Jews couldn't swim in the swimming hole, but there was other accommodations. What's happening in New York? Okay, you can't buy groceries, you can't go to venues, you can't go to anything else unless you've submitted yourself to an invasive medical procedure that's against, I mean, you should have bodily autonomy. If not, hey, open yourself up for, and it's not a slippery slope. Okay, we draw the line now. Okay, no forced medical procedures. Let's go back to what we had originally. It's called rights that were given to you by your Creator, by your God. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. Okay, bodily integrity, lack of search and seizure. Okay, so we can have that Bill of Rights. Okay, not privileges, not designed to be taken away of at a pandemic, because we've been through pandemics before. And we know that this one is not killing 50, 60, 70% of the population. It looks like its infectious fatality is similar to that to the flu. Okay, so this is what you do to keep yourself healthy. Yeah, healthy nervous system, regular exercise, proper nutrition, rest, and prayer and meditation. Does that make sense? So now, if that stuff I just talked about, it passes by the Ministry of Truth, I'm just saying, amen, brother. Okay, yeah, because we're talking about stuff that just, you know, but hopefully they'll yell at British Medical Journal, Lancet, and the CDC, because those are all the places I'm getting the data from. Okay, now we're going to go into the scary part. So I'll see you later. See you next week. Next week we got goal setting, which is going to be amazing. And the week after that, I'm going to show you how to plan a revolution that's been done before. It's a bloodless revolution, but we are going to take our country back, and there's nothing the elite can do about it. So